Welcome to the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast. Many thanks for joining us on the Journal of Biophilic Design today. We are really thrilled to be joined by Sue Riddlestone. She is Chief Executive and co-founder of BioRegional. She received her OBE for services to sustainable business, and also she worked for the London 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games. She spent 5 years closely involved with the United Nations to secure the Sustainable Development Goals as well, working on all the processes there. Very interesting woman. There's a whole bunch of other stuff which I'm leaving out, but I'm going to put a link on the spiel that goes with the podcast. For us, biophilic design encompasses nature-based solutions and also helps specify more climate resilient cities and towns and promotes community cohesion through design and helps clean our air pollution and so much more. And of course, people can read about urban design solutions, biophilic design as well in the city section of every issue of the journal. So please visit the journal of biophilicdesign.com. There are actually many reasons to like the One Planet Living framework, which BioRegional has created, not least because it aligns with many of our biophilic design specifications, but also it's a really simple framework to adopt. So before I waffle on anymore, Sue, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, hello. I'm so happy to be here. I mean, I literally love nature,
Yeah,
so biophilia,
yeah.
very appropriate.
Fantastic.
Mm.
If you could maybe start by telling us a little bit about yourself, please, and what you do, that'd be great.
So thank you for that introduction. And so you said a little bit about what I've been doing. So I'm Chief Exec and co-founder of BioRegional, which is a charity, actually, a not-for-profit that I co-founded 30 years ago now. And what we are all about, how can we're having this terrible impact on the world, our human consumption, and it's having this terrible impact on nature, and it's making the planet unlivable for us as well. And so how can we live our lives in a way where we're in harmony? We are part of nature, where we're in harmony with nature and within the natural limits of the planet, and allowing enough space, sufficient space for nature to thrive. And the biologist E.O. Wilson said that's half the earth. So that's what we're all about. How can we live within a sustainable ecological footprint and allow half the space for nature? And that's what we call One Planet Living. That's kind of the ultimate measure of what we need.
That's fantastic. Well, we're going to talk about One Planet Living, and you're going to explain. You are going to explain what it's
Well,
all. You are.
but it's what we're all about at BioRegional, sustainable living,
Sustainable living.
how we could do that. So we work with the built environment, so places, in terms of setting that up so we can live well within limits and space for nature, and the way we consume and buy products. So we work with a lot of retailers in the same way, how can companies support all of us with their products and services to achieve One Planet Living?
Amazing, amazing. Well, we'll chat about that in a sec. But I did actually I wanted to find out about you actually, and what was the event or trigger that got you sort of, going down this sort of sustainability, regeneration in our built environment, particular. What was the thing?
Well, I'm of advanced years now.
Tell me about
And
it.
back in 1980 something, late 1980s, it was sort of in the news that seals were dying in the seas because of pollution that we'd created. Old growth forests were being chopped down, and that was having an impact on orca on the west coast of Canada, around Clayoquot Sound. And there was a lot of talk about green consumerism. And I had originally trained as a nurse, had my kids, and once the kids get past the waking up all night long stage, you can start to think about more things, can't you? And I just felt I had to do something. I just felt called to do something. So it's very much a vocation for me. And I started out setting up a local Greenpeace group to raise money for Greenpeace. We raised a lot of money, helped to get World Park Antarctica treaty, which actually is just about to run out if it hasn't run out. It's like, the world agreed, don't touch Antarctica. It's up for review again now. And then, local groups and so on. But I thought, as my kids were going to school, I thought, well, I really want to set up a green business. And so the idea of BioRegional was very much around how can we. So I co-founded it with Purin Desai, who's now working on more digital space, doing oneplanet.com, digital platform. And it was very much how can we live well within the natural limits and leave space for nature. So BioRegional comes from the idea of bioregionalism. So that idea that wherever we live, there are resources, there's waste, there's sunlight, wind. How can we sort of live more in harmony with nature and the resources that are abundant around us in a more circular way and create diverse regional economies? And so that's where the name BioRegional came from. And then we started out working on some sustainable products and our own companies that were producing like a closed loop paper cycle at a time when that wasn't very thought of, and sustainable hemp textiles, local paper production, and sustainable charcoal locally produced. So we started out doing all that, and then not very many years in, I think it was 1997 and we founded in 1994, we were successful. We'd got these things going, these little social enterprises going, and we needed a new office, a green office. I said, well, why don't we build a green office? And we found a bit of land and got the cooperation of the local authority. Peabody Trust put up the money to do it. We did BedZED, and that was what led us into not just working on products and sort of the economy, but also the built environment. Because after we did BedZED, it was such a roaring success, we had no idea. And people came to us and said, oh, can you help us do a BedZED? So that was when we created the One Planet Living framework.
Sorry, that BedZED, can you just explain what that is? Because if people don't know, it's Beddington, isn't it? So can you explain just quickly what it is? Yeah.
Well, BedZED was very much to be our office. So we did get an office there, but it was also a large site. So it actually became an eco-village. And it stands for Beddington, which is the local area, zero carbon or zero fossil energy development. So it was probably maybe the first large net zero development in the UK, 100 homes, workspace, we've got a little school.
Oh, that's lovely. That's really nice. Actually, for listeners, I did an interview with Simon Corby, who is founder of the Alliance, that's French, the Alliance of Sustainable Building Products. As people can find that on the on Spotify and Audible, as well as on YouTube and on our website, journalbiophilic.com. But he worked on that, and you worked together, didn't you, on that? So that's a small world.
Yeah, he was a great guy. Well, he still is, still doing great things.
Yeah.
And actually, the sustainable building materials, which is what he particularly worked on, is so important for what he's doing now. It's so important to build with natural and bio-based materials, whilst making sure we do it in such a way that we're not impacting nature negatively. Really important.
Absolutely. Can you tell us a little bit about the One Planet Living framework, actually? Because I mean, I've actually got the document here. I had to print it out because it was just there's so much good stuff in there. You've got everything like what does good look like, and you've done it in such a simple way in there's 4 sections, it looks like, how you use it, how you use the, with living resources internally to support your own frameworks and things, all the way through to goals and guidance for, 10 One Planet Living principles. But can you tell us a little bit about what the framework is, goals and guidelines basically for new build communities in the UK? And it's really clearly outlined. I think it's really accessible for communities, interior designers, architects, landscape architects, anyone basically, planners who are working in the built environment. So, I mean, maybe could you explain a little bit about what the framework is, please?
Yes. So One Planet Living came about as a result of BedZED, that so many people came to us and said, could you help us to create a BedZED? So we thought about the approaches we'd taken and we systematised that together with the work that we'd done on sustainable products into these 10 principles to think about. And it's coming very much from the point of view of designing for people to live a sustainable life, including all the embodied impacts of that, and to achieve One Planet Living. So it's a quite a high level thing, which is quite fun to use. It's very easy to understand because it's just in plain English, around what we need, what we consume. So from zero carbon energy, zero waste, travel and transport, materials and products. This is a test, isn't it? Can I remember all 10? Water, food, the economy and the community,
Zero waste,
health
carbon,
and
zero carbon
happiness.
energy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all the way through to health and happiness and sort of well-being, really.
Yeah.
And the idea is that if you're working on building a community, you'd think, first of all, benchmark. Well, where are we now? Where are we now? If it's a new build or even a refurb, how well are we doing on any of these 10 principles? And think about it from the perspective of the people that are going to live there. So we often do a sort of day in the life. What's it like for someone when they get up in the morning, from a family to an older person or a single person, a child, to think about how is it made easy for them to live a sustainable life, because our homes, we sleep there at night, we come back there every night. So many things revolve around our homes. So it can really massively influence around half of our ecological footprint to enable one planet living. So it's really important to take this approach, because it's much, much more than just the building energy demand. Of course, that's really important. Ideally, to have a home that sips energy, so it's really energy efficient, and generating renewable energy on site, and also buying off site renewables, so being efficient and renewable energy. But it's so much more than that. It's about thinking where we build so that it makes it easy for people not to have to use a car, to be car reliant, or put in place think about, well, what are the solutions for that? So at my BedZED home, or every home at BedZED, had a space to put a bicycle near the front door. And then when I just moved, and when I was looking at houses, I was like, well, where am I going to put my e-bike? I can't leave it outside, it will get stolen. Anyway, I've just had to pay a lot of money for a steel bike shed, but it's so much more easy to just wheel it in the front door. Things like that, and the sort of nudge, reducing the amount of space for roads, and having car sharing clubs. So just thinking about it from a person's lifestyle. Thinking about nature. Land and nature is one of our principles, so it would be, obviously in the UK we've got biodiversity net gain, but we can do better than that. So I think it's packing in the space for nature all around, which makes it lovely for people. So at BedZED, for example, we built roof gardens, and then I had an apartment which was sort of on the first and second floor. There's one below me, a home below me, and yet I could look out on green, my little garden, which was all with a wildflower meadow and all sort of planted up for nature, and watch the birds coming and going. It's just delightful, just a few minutes each day, just to stop and linger and watch nature. And we did actually give a big boost to nature there. We had green roofs as well, and we kept natural features and planted it up for nature. And in fact, the Residents Association carried on and planted it up even more. So there's really just full of exciting creatures to share our lives with. I actually saw a sparrow. I mean, this is in South London.
Yeah.
I saw a sparrowhawk come down and catch a starling for breakfast on just a, it's a road and busy cars and buses all going by. And it's like, actually, you can make space for nature even in the city.
Yeah.
So,
Well, if you've got the will and the inclination.
yeah. So it's all about designing it, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And usually it's good to involve some local people or local elected representatives, because they've got more knowledge about the area. And you can use it for your own life, for a business. Lots of schools have used it, lots of sort of local authorities, county councils even, cities have used One Planet Living. It's actually 7 million people have used One Planet Living, or they're living in a place which has had One Planet Living used as a sort of design tool, either a new build or a city or a region, an area or school. And then the idea is you then turn that into a plan and have it's important to sort of make people responsible, because this is about people and how we live our lives, but it's also about people who are in positions to do something about it, to make decisions or to sort of keep things running along. So having somebody responsible to deliver on all of it, and afterwards having some post-occupancy evaluation or reporting on it. And so we've made that freely available. Like you say, there's a great guide that my colleagues, we all work together. I'll give a shout out to Nicole and Philippa and Lewis. We work together to update the goals and guidance, especially for UK communities, but there is guidance for every type of project or organisation and internationally as well, all free on our website. So we say you can go away and use it. Best to use it in this way, in a sort of collaborative workshop, to come up with your plan, and then as you implement it, make sure people are responsible and trained up in what's the vision, what we're trying to achieve here. But if people want recognition for that, we just ask, send us your plan and just cover the cost of our time to review it, and then we can give people a badge if they want to talk about it publicly, especially we're sort of conscious that it's freely available and we don't want it to be used to sort of win planning permission and then not actually do it. So we ask to see it and give people some feedback. And actually, when we do that, my colleague Nicole, she's so experienced. She was actually our BedZED project manager and has worked on many sustainable communities down the years. She can often give some good advice. Oh, you're trying to do something with waste here, or embodied material, carbon materials. Oh, another person did this or that. What did the other One Planet Living leaders do? So she can give some good advice and feedback on how to really achieve One Planet Living. And it's quite good to use it to engage residents, use it to engage the local authority as well. I always say to people, go to the Global Footprint Network website and work out your footprint and see how many planets you are. And then you can always game it. You can try out, well, what happens if I get rid of my car? What happens if I stop eating meat? And see where you get to.
Yeah, exactly. It's all these little tweaks, isn't it, we can do in our lives that really make sort of a better impact. The actual plan, I think, is really good. And you talk about community and engagement, I think is so important. And you mentioned also at BedZED how like the community have gone on, the Residents Association have gone on and done even more planting. And I think that's a lot to be said actually about when you engage people at the early stages. I mean, I interview architects and people that get involved in, that create schools, but when they work with the teachers and the kids, you have a completely different impact. And I think this action plan that you've got really tries to engage that, doesn't it? I mean, you involve everybody really, don't you? You encourage it.
Exactly. Yeah. And people can get involved in what they're really interested in. When we used it in the city of Brighton and Hove, there were a whole lot of people working on food, a whole collective. It was like they suddenly had permission from the local government to really run with food things. Other people are more interested in culture or fair trade. It depends what.
What
And
you're
then people
interested
really, it kind of empowers the people to just get on with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually wanted to look at some of the aspects of the framework, if that, so people can kind of have a sort of tangible idea. I mean, there are lots that overlap with biophilic design. So if people are listening to this, there's things like you talk about timber buildings, for instance, and climate change mitigation, flood reduction, which is obviously what we as part of biophilic design by default, it helps support all that, reduces heat island effect and all that. Maybe can you give us some examples or maybe your recommendations, which maybe architects or designers or people in the landscape audience as well might be interested to hear about? Just one or two, maybe kind of like some of the key advisory aspects of the framework.
Well,
I know there are lots.
I think where we are now in the sector is that everybody knows how to reduce operational energy, and people are just starting to get to grips with the embodied energy of the building materials.
Yeah.
And as I keep saying to anyone who'll listen, because we do work on this with the UN as well, set up a website for them on it. 50% of resource consumption is for construction materials globally. 9% of the global carbon footprint is construction materials. And even if we get more efficient with them, we won't achieve it without more bio-based materials in terms of going to net zero in line with Paris Agreement. So timber buildings is something everybody's getting to grips with. And actually, there's a lovely building called the Black and White Building in London, which Wall Thistleton Architects worked on. And we went on a tour there recently. And when you go into a building built of wood, the smell is just wonderful. And it's something that wouldn't have occurred to you unless you're in there. It was just lovely, and felt the whole sort of feeling for the people in there just felt more relaxing and lovely. And we brought some work colleagues with us, or partners who work on build. They wanted to think about building with wood, and it was just lovely for them to actually see, oh, I see how you did it sort of physically, how it's done, because you can read about things in books, but there's nothing like visiting somewhere. So I don't know, do you have demonstrations of good biophilic design that people can go and visit, a sort of network or case studies?
Yeah, we do. And all the contributors on our website, which if you go to the journalbiphilicdesign.com, there's a contributors page, and everybody on there is like really more than happy to be spoken to and, outreach to. And we're doing a whole series of events and learning walks and that, obviously, and we've got the conference as well, where people talk about case studies, and then because they're in all the journals as well. But I actually did a podcast with Andrew at the Wall Thistleton.
Did you?
Yeah, it was just, like you say, it's just such a beautiful, beautiful building. And, silent build, the sort of natural shading on the outside, with the wood strats. And the sensory aspect of it is just absolutely wonderful.
And they built with earth as well. They built an earth building, which won a Architects Prize. I think it was for a religious organisation. So, it's good if architects can start to think about these things and then learn from each other. So I've invited Dave Lomax as my contact at Thistleton that I talk to the most, and invited him to speak at events, and he was mobbed. I mean, we were at Future Build, and afterwards all these architects came up to him afterwards, and he was there until the next session finished, passing on his wisdom. But they've also made it all available on their website about building with wood. For example, how do you deal with insurance? Because people are like, oh, it will burn down. They're so worried. So they've tried to come up with all the solutions and ways to make it easier for the sector. And I think that's really important, that the leaders do share their learning and the knowledge. And we always try to do that at BioRegional. So you can look on our website, you can look at One Planet Living action plans of One Planet Living projects and sort of see what they did. So there's an example in Canada, a windmill development. They've and actually also Socius in the UK. So green walls to pack in the nature. I'm also on the board of the Future Homes Hub, which is the network for UK house builders and the supply chain. And they've committed to Homes for Nature, Swift bricks in every home. And they're just looking more and more, how do we go about biodiversity net gain and sort of trying to bring the whole sector along. So it's not just a few leaders, it's just normal for everyone to do.
But I was just going to say, that's really interesting. I just want to talk about that a little bit, if that's all right. So the people who are on that body, that group, are they like all the main national house builders and smaller ones and things?
It's chaired by the chief exec of Barratt Homes, David Thomas, and pretty much all the volume house builders and a lot of SME builders are part of it. And we have the ear of the government as well. So we're trying to, because sometimes when government make policy, it's not been sort of road tested. So this way we can try to test out things and then give feedback to the government about what works and what doesn't work to inform good policy making as well. So I think it's really great. It's
Yeah.
came out of the House Builders Federation, Home Builders Federation, and led by Ed Lockhart Mummery. It's really good.
That's fantastic. That's actually really good. I want to talk about actually because you've been involved in a lot. I mean, you mentioned Greenpeace earlier, and sort of obviously this,
Mm,
you cut your sort of teeth and your grassroots kind of real lobbying and everything.
yeah,
You've been involved in policy at government level, and you wrote the paper, and I'm just quoting here: all new homes should be carbon zero and you wrote that in 2003, and
yeah,
it became government policy in 2006. And you've also been part of the Government Eco Towns Challenge panel,
mm,
where you were the lead author there, as well as to make what makes an eco town report, which was published for CABE in 2008. And then that informed the Eco Towns policy. So you've really been like throughout your whole career, you've been really instrumental in really trying to get this into legislation, on agenda, into government. I mean, obviously, it's so important, isn't it, that we get these recommendations in. I mean, for you, what are the main challenges? I mean, you're obviously collecting voices and you're rallying around and getting, but what are the challenges and also maybe what are the opportunities as well?
yeah.
Um,
I'll start with the opportunities. So this is what I've learned. If
Take
there's
note,
if there's
everybody.
if there's something going on, like the government or if the government or I don't know, an industry body has got something going on, like for example, the reason I wrote all new homes should be zero carbon was I was London's Sustainable Development Commissioner, and the mayor asked us to contribute to how are we going to achieve climate goals in the London plan. And that came out of some workshops that I ran. So the mayor had actually asked for it. I did handed in the homework, and then the lawyers wouldn't let them put it in the London plan because they said, oh, well, everyone will think we're going to do it because it was so out there at the time. Um, Things like the Olympics was happening, and or so people were going to bid for the Olympics, and again the mayor said, can commissioners join in with helping to make it sustainable? So it's almost like you've got there's a process you can contribute to. A recent example is the government's coming up with the Future Homes Standard, which is the new building regulations. And when it came out, it was a little bit underwhelming. We'd all contributed to the consultation and we were a bit worried. So myself and Lynn Sullivan from Good Homes Alliance and many other great initiatives, we decided we had to do something. So we convened people to get behind, to draw out some clear messages in
Yeah.
terms of, well, what do the leaders in the sector that have been doing future homes, they're doing it right now, what do we think the future homes standard should be, but also being realistic with what can actually happen now and what needs to be a process for later. So I think, first of all, getting involved with something that's happening
Yeah.
and joining in and at the early stage, and then being very clear and trying to get a sort of shared voice that's very clear, not asking for too many things, not asking for the moon, and so that they're hearing different people say the same thing. And then it's easier for policymakers to take it on board. And when we worked on the Sustainable Development Goals, we were that we saw there was a role going to be the NGO focal point for sustainable consumption and production. So we said, oh, we'll do it. And we were already working on trying to influence that sustainable development framework that was going to come out. And nobody knew it was going to be the goals at the time. So another sort of learning point is to seek sort of get the views of all the stakeholders and synthesize it together and make it clear that it's not just the view of one organisation. So we actually worked with Beyond 2015, which was a group of over 1,000 civil society organisations who were, contributing to this Rio Plus 20, it was called, the Sustainable Development process. And so we basically held some webinars and sought their views and then synthesised that thinking into a document and some text, because you've got to give policymakers some text. So that's what we did with eco-towns as well, some concrete things they could actually run with. And then I presented it to the co-chairs in New York. And later that afternoon, one of the co-chairs from Kenya came by and said, "Oh, thanks for your presentation this morning, and we've read your proposals and your report. We like it. We'll use it." I was like, "Oh,
Fantastic. Yeah.
amazing." And that became Goal 12.
Really?
Yeah, responsible consumption production. And we actually had all sorts of things around that. We had a campaign where we got, we made, my colleague Freya, who worked on this, she was so great. She was quite young and she mobilised the youth group of the going to the UN. So they made it quite a fun and funky campaign with a I Heart SCP and giving out badges to the diplomats. And we brought it alive. Like, I got the developer from Canada, Windmill, to come and speak to the diplomats. I talked about One Planet Living. I got B&Q, because we work with B&Q. Got Rachel from B&Q to come to New York and present to the diplomats about how companies are achieving sustainable consumption and production, because Kingfisher do some great stuff. We've worked with them for 20 years now, and on their products. So we write their sustainable home product guidelines, and it now represents, I think it's 53%. I might have undercooked that, but they're aiming for 60% of sales being within these guidelines, so better produced. So to recap then, it's get involved with something that's going on early, bring a sort of shared view of wider stakeholders and give them some evidence of real examples of how it can work, and have a common shared, don't ask for too many things, and try and make it something that they can actually use, some text they can actually use. So that's what I've learned.
That's absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for that. It's really generous of you to share that. And you have done like blinking amazing stuff, actually. I did a bit of stalking, obviously, because before I interviewed you, and let alone what's on your website, there's like you've done a lot of things, and really appreciate you sharing that advice. We're actually, because Biophilic Design, this, we're sort of trying to like bring about change. We're trying to campaign as well by, we've been doing it through media and trying to sort of raise awareness and speak and on all this kind of thing. We're going to set up a Biophilic Design Foundation just to add another voice, like from like people that are trying to do it from the mental health, environmental psychology, as well as sustainability, and try and sort of knit it together, if you know what I mean, from our perspective. So, would love to collaborate, with if there's any opportunity or anything. I'm
Yes.
sure we've got thousands, it's a 30,000 that listen to this podcast. And, and I'm sure, and they're all like passionate about biophilic design, and everybody is so keen to try and, support in each individual, whether they're an engineer, building engineer or planner or interior designer or an architect. So, if there's any opportunity to get involved or support what you're doing, or to lend our these guys' voices and our voices, then that'd be
Well,
great.
I think one thing is join the Future Homes Hub, because that's sort of got a hotline into policy.
Okay.
I think it might be free for smaller
Okay.
organisations to join.
Yeah.
Then you'll start seeing what policies are coming up. There's definitely the DEFRA land use framework
Okay.
that the Minister Steve Reed is championing.
Yeah.
That's an opportunity, I think. There's a circular economy task force.
Okay. Yeah.
Co-chair Paul Eakins is a great friend to BioRegional and lots of people. Maybe that's more about choice of materials.
Yeah.
I think with the Future Home Standard, it's not really a complete standard at the moment.
No.
In that it's just the building regulations, and there's much more to a home than just building it, those physical parameters. Their nature is a part of that. So I think we're saying to the government that there should be a follow-on future home standard and developed, and so it needs to fit in somehow with the, like the building regulations. People talk about Part Z is proposed to measure embodied carbon. I don't know offhand, but maybe some of the listeners know, or around where nature could fit into the sort of Ministry of Housing and Local Government policies, or perhaps DEFRA policies. I don't know. I think DEFRA policies don't so much touch building homes, do they?
No, not
There's
really.
definitely something about
because also
something we didn't talk about, which is that you mentioned and I wanted to pick up on, which is important, is that all of the benefits of nature around us. So there was the NHS Healthy New Towns.
Yeah.
So the NHS, I don't know what they're doing with that now. Obviously, they're a bit preoccupied with so many things, but the health and well-being elements and how that could fit into policy and having them alongside you as champions.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a healthy
But
hospital.
there might be some policy. So I think look out for those are some policy department, like obviously DEFRA and this land use strategy. But there may be something around the building regulations. Oh, the thing that I wanted to pick up on that you talked about was the benefits that nature brings us. So the well-being is one, but also the heat island and cooling and shade and mitigating heavy rainfall to reduce flooding. These are all really important benefits. There's a trees group led by Sue James. I don't know if she's in your network.
Yeah.
She's really good on anything policy related as well.
Yeah.
So I think, have a think and then, come up with a strategy actually, I always say come up with a strategy. I kind of find like, oh, something's going on, just get involved.
Exactly. It's been the whole journey of this journal, actually. It's been started with this and then it started with the podcast and it's now a journal, now it's events and actually it's so life affirming because, things are changing. There are so many more people understanding it and coming at it from all different ways, whether it's like from the psychology point of view. It's even like having like more views of windows in hospitals, turn the beds around so people can see see the views, do the planting outside, which will increase the biodiversity net gains. Don't stick the biodiversity net gains off site. See what you can do. Put, vertical walls and create small courtyards. And there's so many, you can get really creative, especially if you can get the nurses involved and, and the staff and everybody else,
Oh, it's funny you should say that because we've been working with Socius on the London Cancer Hub, which is an amazing, huge project around the Royal Marsden. And those are the sort of conversations that we've had. And they've used One Planet Living and they have tried to work in as much nature as they can for that very reason of how much it benefits people.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the other thing as well with Biophilic design, we talk about natural materials. So having more wood, just as tables, all that kind of thing, furnishings, more natural materials, which has less impacts on the environment. Obviously, less VOCs in our lungs and everything. So even using like lamb's wool or mycelium for the panels for acoustics or for reducing the for insulation, that's the word I'm trying to look for. Do you know what I mean? Stuff like that we look for alternatives. We don't have to. I mean, yes, we'll need better acoustics, which is obviously one of the patterns, if you want, of biophilic design. But being able to employ a more eco-friendly, bio-based solution, because that's ultimately what we're trying to get back to. Because we basically, with the concept is we evolved in a bio-based environment, and now we're in a totally a man-made environment, and what we're trying to do is just reverse that to bring as many of the best of nature into our environment, and it's not just trees and plants, it's actually the patterns and the materials of nature, which should actually be inside the building as well. So it's quite a lot involved and it's so exciting, and there's so many solutions that kind of overlap and articulate and communicate this. It's like,
I think it's there are so many great products out there, and as I mentioned about that study that says we can't actually achieve the carbon reductions either without bio-based materials, and it had little
Yeah.
in the diagram, it had mycelium, it had, you know, all
Yeah.
of those things you just said
Exactly.
as materials that we should be looking to use.
Yeah.
But it's so much more than as carbon saving, and there's just so many
Yeah. When you package it up into
benefits.
yeah,
Yeah.
you package it up as well into the mental health crisis, and
Mm,
so actually the more nature we see, nature-based materials we see, the happier we are, the more productive we
yeah.
are, which means the economy is better and everything else. So yeah, there's so many benefits to it. It's like just need to be doing, we need to be, yeah, just just
Definitely. I
wipe.
think it's about getting the scale of it onto the market as well. So I know that with the timber materials, the builders are a little bit skeptical. They're like,
Yeah,
well, we can't do that at scale.
yeah,
But we got to get started and
yeah,
build up that supply chain, and then the cost comes down,
exactly.
partly because of the volume, but also that the trades get used to using it, and they don't, because usually they would quote an extra sort of, I don't know what I'm doing factor.
Exactly, that's it. Yeah, so I did a podcast with this Lambda actually, which were using this wall based, and what they did in order to scale it, instead of just
Mm,
having like, oh, this is like wall fluffy stuff that we're squashing and it's like in a roll, they've actually looked at how construction uses mainly insulation boards. And I said, well, okay, we need to make this into a board. So what they've done is they've found another bio-based material to squish it together with. Obviously, that's a completely technical term. But to
yeah,
make these boards that then they can just go, well, actually, we're not asking you to do something else and use a completely different methodology, just the material, just switch the material out and then you can put it in. So that's
yeah,
how they're going to look to scale. It's actually what you're using at the moment and how can we just switch that out to make it path of least resistance and, to get it back into the system. So it's systems thinking, isn't it?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Really, really cool. There's so many things I want to ask you, Sue, and we're gonna have to like, I don't know, have another conversation another time or something. And maybe you could do a workshop actually with some of, as an event for us. That would be
yeah.
brilliant. We could love
We
to.
could try out doing one planet living or something. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, exactly. Let's do that. So you've got loads of developments all over the world. I've noticed
Mm.
you said, sort of villages nature in Paris, the resort in France.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Village Nature.
Okay.
It's like a centre parks, and
Okay.
centre parks is quite
Yeah.
based around
Yeah.
being in the woods.
Yeah.
So there was a sort of near the Euro Disney sort of tourist area. There was a sort of abandoned low grade forestry area,
Yeah.
and Gérard Bremont, who was had a company Pierre Vacances, he started out with ski resorts, and he read about BedZED and One Planet Living in a magazine, and he came to us in 2004 and said that he wanted to develop this land, and he ended up developing it in partnership with Euro Disney
Oh,
and so the continental version of Centre Parks. And he wanted to do it as good as BedZED, really eco-friendly and achieve one planet living. So, although at first sight, building a tourism complex on a low-grade forestry would seem like, the local people were like, wow, and there was even some bad press in the national newspapers about it. But it was pretty dead and barren in there. It was just tall trees and not much else going on. So the whole thing was designed using One Planet Living. And now I wish I had the stats for you. I can't remember them off the top of my head, but I actually went on holiday there, and we actually also had a staff away day there. So we've seen it when it was all finished and kind of lived it for a few days.
yeah.
And it's brimming, buzzing with nature. They created all sorts of water features and planting to attract nature, working with ecologists to really give it a boost. And so it's a lovely, tranquil thing with timber lodges.
Wow.
Um, the activities are all very wholesome, like beekeeping or bread making or gardening or going for a ride on a horse. They're all electric, so like when they strim around to sort of keep it a bit maintained, they use electric strimmers and the electric vehicles. And they've got the whole water slide thing. And what they've done is they've drilled down into the geothermal basin that Paris sits in. to generate, to get the heat, basically, to heat up the swimming pools. So you've got your lazy river and all of that. And it also supplies about 40% of the heat for Euro Disney in Paris. So, and you can get there on the train, and I have done, so you can have a one planet holiday at Village Nature, and it's really nice.
That's fantastic. I'm going to have to, there's obviously loads of links and things. So I'm going to have to put all these links that are in, that goes with the spiel with the podcast so people can go and find them and obviously revisit, One Planet Living and find out more and sign up and, and everything and actually download this amazing document, which is so brilliant. I mean, it's brilliantly put together. It's easily accessible. It's very visual as well. And you've got loads of examples. It's like what's not to like and what's not to you can easily use this to, as you say, whether you're a community or business or you're a construction company. It's like it's so super simple. So
glad you like it.
Yeah, no, really. So before I ask you the final magic question, which I am going to ask you, is there anything else you'd like to add at all?
I just want to reiterate that we are nature.
Yeah.
We are part of nature. I think a lot of our problems come from seeing ourselves as separate and not really, and taking things for granted, like drinking water or fresh air. This is all nature, and you just cannot take that for granted. And we've got to just always try and remember that.
Absolutely. So, final question then that I ask everyone at the end of the podcast. If you could paint the world with the magic brush of biophilia, what would it look like?
Oh, well, first of all, I think we've definitely got to fulfill E.O. Wilson's let's at least allow half the planet for the rest of nature. So I always try and remember that and hang on to it. Obviously, it's not exactly 50% where you live, but basically plenty of space for nature. In my home, in our homes, I think at my BedZED home, whatever window I looked out of, I could see trees or green. And I think we need that. Homes will be made of natural materials. They'll smell nice and feel nice, like that black and white building I mentioned. You just hear the noises of nature, like the hedgehogs outside my house in BedZED. You hear them; they're really noisy, the way they snuffle and snort. And, so I don't know, having more the sounds of nature. Perhaps when we've got rid of the combustion engine and we can hear nature more, hear the birds, there's more nature, and we can all feel it and hear it. I don't know, I've run out of steam there, but basically I'd like in terms of what we at BioRegional and what is, you could say it's a brush of biophilia, but where our mission and our sort of vision is where we're all living happy, healthy lives within the natural limits of the planet and leaving sufficient space for nature, wildlife and wilderness to thrive.
Thank you for listening to the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast.